U.S. officials say President Biden is looking at a strong response to the deadly attack of our military without going to war. But some lawmakers argue this is war and will only escalate if we fail to act decisively with weakness that would only encourage more attacks. And what some argue brought us to this point. Well, joining us now with this and more is retired Lieutenant Colonel at Defense Priorities and host of the Daniel Davis Deep Dive on YouTube. Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, thanks for joining us this morning.
Hi, Jan.
Lieutenant Colonel, this does mark the first time U.S. troops have been killed by enemy fire in the Middle East since the start of the war in Israel. So what happened here? We're seeing reports now that the enemy drone over Jordan was mistaken for a U.S. drone. But how many times are we going to allow this from Iran-backed terrorists?
Well, yeah, I think this really underscores how vulnerable these outposts are. And as I think I've talked about several times on your show over the months, that this is what I have been fearing, is that by having all of these scattered troops just scattered throughout the desert in Iraq and Syria, we were inviting this kind of attack. And according to the Pentagon, this was the 160th attack that had happened, and it finally got through. But there was actually one before that struck a barracks building and actually didn't explode. So we got lucky before, but the luck finally ran out. And as long as we keep these troops here on the ground, these kind of things are going to happen no matter what President Biden does in response. And that's the part of this equation that so far hasn't gotten any attention.
U.S. policy of deterrence to date, though, has also clearly failed. So some say there are two options: strike Iran-backed bases and commanders, or strike Iran. So how should the U.S. respond?
Yeah, that shows the limited, I guess, viewpoints of the people that are talking about this. And I hope that that's not what the administration is doing, because there's a lot more than two here. Because some people want to say it's either hit them hard or hit them really hard in talking about Iran. But there are other things that we can and should do, because it is in America's interest not to escalate this. If we go and hit Iran hard like they suggest, and we don't withdraw our troops from these locations, we're just making them even more bigger targets, because so far it's been these Iran-backed groups, these militia groups, Kataib Hezbollah, according to the Pentagon, and several others also. But if we strike directly at Iran and hit their IRGC or some of their other bigger targets, then we run the risk that they escalate against our troops with their higher end targets, military assets, missiles, rockets that can defeat those local defenses systems that we have on these small bases. And we could have even more casualties.
So
and then we
we
have a potential to expand.
So to your point, should we then withdraw troops?
Absolutely, without question. That's what I've been advocating really since 2019, actually, because these troops, this is crucial to understand. These troops are not serving any valid American purpose. And even though the Pentagon keeps saying, oh, well, this is a counter ISIS mission. No, that mission ended in 2019, and they have not been doing anything related to American national security since that time. Even though they say that repeatedly, it simply isn't true, Jan.
Should the U.S. go after senior Islamic Revolutionary Guard commanders in Iraq or Syria, as President Trump did in 2020, killing Quds commander Qasem Soleimani in Baghdad?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people cite that. They say, yeah, because then Iran backed down. No, they didn't back down. What they did was they fired a number of precision-guided missiles that penetrated our air defense and hit a bunch of buildings on the Al-Assad air base, wounding 100 Americans. And according to a 60 Minutes show about a year later, where they talked about what happened, it was sheer luck that a bunch of Americans weren't killed then, which could have propelled us into a war at that point. So we dodged that bullet. You do that again, and Iran uses that same technology against some of our more vulnerable locations, now then we could really be in a big world of hurt and be, put into a tremendous potential being sucked into a war. So that is not easy stuff.
How do we stop then these Iran-backed terrorists? Because this could continue, and as you mentioned, come out even stronger against us, because some say this now could show the weakness depending on how the response comes from the administration. What are you watching at this point? Which enemy countries could also come to Iran's aid? What are you keeping an eye on when it comes to what's happening right now in the Middle East?
Yeah, without question, the administration has to respond against the people that launched this attack, whether it's Kataib Hezbollah or whoever else we identified that it did it. They must die. I mean, I'll just categorically say that. You kill American troops, then the perpetrators have to die. But it is crucial that by not expand it beyond that so that we invite more attacks onto our troops, which is why I say that the next step has to be to withdraw our troops to get them out of vulnerability. But the thing that I'm watching for, to your point, is if we go farther and we hit Iran and it starts to expand, now then you have the potential that Russia could actually help out Iran, whether that's with targeting information or intelligence or other things maybe they're withholding right now, because we're already seeing Iran help Russia in their war, and it wouldn't be out of question for Russia to help Iran if they get into a war with the U.S.
Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, always great to see you, sir. Thanks for joining us this morning here on the National Desk.
Thanks a lot, Jane.